I had seen this film during now Richard doesn't know, I had seen the film during the whole screening process, and Leslie and I had conversations about the film, and I just want to say that it is affecting me all over again. So I'm going to just breathe through this for a minute, and thank you again for making this absolutely bold and fearless film. Just want to congratulate you. You have your director of photography with you here. So why don't the three of you just identify yourselves real quickly, and then you'll do the same, and then I'll start working backwards to your film, which is also a magnificent little film. So go ahead, Leslie, why don't you start with pass her up.
Hello. I'm Leslie, as you saw in the film. And yep, I'm the director, producer, editor, a lot of other things. And sitting next to me is our wonderful DP, director of photography.
I'm Jen. I shot Leslie's film with her.
And I'm Leslie's mother, and it was a difficult film to watch, but I'm proud that we're all here today.
My name is Matteo. I filmed just being here, so yeah.
So let's start with you, Matteo. First of all, you just graduated Middlebury College, is that right? And he was headed out to Colorado where he had a job to start when we let him know that his film had been selected as the winner of the Scholweis Family Prize for Best Vermont-Made Film. So he turned around and came back to the festival. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Went from Denver to Newark, is that what you did? And drove up here with your folks?
Yep.
Where are your folks?
Out there.
Thank you for doing it. Very nice. Just spend a little time, if you could, Lindy, you could lend me that microphone for a second. I appreciate it. Thank you. You became aware of Walter how?
Yeah, so the film that you saw was my senior thesis for my film and environmental studies major. And initially, I had set out to make a series of profiles on people who lived inherently isolated lives pre-COVID as a way to make some sort of film that offered some kind of empathy for those of us who were going through, forced isolation throughout all of this, but just in general, like COVID aside, I think I was just looking for something to have people to be able to connect with and find compassion and companionship and empathy with. So I just started asking around, and Walter's story was actually the last one that kind of came into my lap. And as I was filming things throughout the fall, I was working on a few other projects, and then once I finally met him and spent time with him, it kind of just took over because it felt right, and it was something that resonated with me personally as someone who has a lot, goes through anxiety and whatnot. And yeah, it was just a really special thing to be a part of, and a great friend that I made as well.
How much time did you spend at his place?
At the beginning of October, I started going there. I didn't start filming immediately, but just to spend some time with him. And then from that point onward, I was there anywhere between 3 and 5 times a week from October until right before Thanksgiving. And then I was staying over in Brandon in January, and I went and visited him a few times then as well, and just to talk and hang out, but also to film some of those shots in the snowy scenes.
Mm-hmm. So the trust developed fairly quickly between you and Walter, and he basically gave you access.
Yeah. He's immediately super open and vulnerable with me, which was really appreciative, and I was appreciative of that. And as soon as I went there and met him in person, I was open and vulnerable with him too about what I've gone through, and I think that kind of helped kickstart our bond. And it kind of went from me asking him, is it okay if I come up here to film, to him calling me up, oh, when are you coming up, So it went from me making this film to us having this friendship to me getting to like just sit there and watch him and learn from him as well.
The beavers are rather amazing in this. So when you encountered them for the first time, his relationship with the beavers, did you think to yourself, this is sort of truly a revelation, this is the essence of the film, his relationship, his communication with them? In other words, did you think you lucked out, or was this, did he give you any hint when you first met him, they were there, he was rather enamored of them?
Yeah, he mentioned that they were there and that he like really loved nature. That was the one thing that he made really clear, was that he was really passionate about just being outside and being still in nature. The beavers, he talked about them, but his main thing was he just talked about how he has the same routine every day that involves walking his paths and sitting in certain spots, and at the end of the day sitting up in his tree stand and just watching and observing and listening. And then he has his interaction with the beavers, and then he goes back, and then he goes up in his back porch and does the same thing and watches them and looks out and just observes.
So what I like to say is that you captured that rhythm really well, right? The film is simple, but it reveals a great deal about him without you having to intrude or create some artifice. I thought you did just a quite brilliant job with this, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank
Sure.
you.
Yeah. Well, let me turn to Leslie and her film. So one of the things that she and I talked about, again, this is a world premiere, okay? So it's, I think that you bringing this to us, and the fact that you're both the filmmaker and also the subject of the film is extraordinary. I don't really know that this is done very much. And you went out and did the interviews, brought these people who had one time in your life, you brought them back, which is risky, in searching for closure. You went to the school itself, which could have triggered all kinds of things, and did. Risky, hugely risky, and yet here is the document that you stuck with this and gave us all something that, I'm listening to the applause, I'm also the idea that there are many people likely in this room who have thoughts that are running parallel to what you are showing us here. So could you talk for a minute about the decision to take these risks, make the film despite all the odds, and then come to conclusion with this, which, by the way, the last shot of you throwing ice up into the air, you know how I feel about this. Start with hockey skates and end with hockey skates. But the liberating feeling at the end of you letting go on skates, very, very powerful. But talk to us all about the risk you sort of took to make this film.
Well, thank you. And congrats to you as well. I don't remember your first name. But your film was great, and
Yes.
sounds like you're gonna live a great life You're on your way there. I think the honest answer is that I didn't know how risky it would be. And if I knew how risky it would be, I would hope I would still have started, but I didn't intend to be in the film when I started it. Jen can attest to that. And that quickly was obvious that wasn't going to be the case, that I would need to be in it. And then, I forget what I was going to say, but basically the risks kind of just piled on from there. It was really hard to go to Utah. I had no aftercare or plan for what would happen going to this place, and not only being the person to have these conversations with people, and we interviewed more staff than we included, but we were setting up the shoots on the fly. I mean, I was like creeping into these people's lives, like, please talk to me, and please talk to me about this place that you may be ashamed that you worked there, and maybe you, I think the fact that the history teacher is now a chocolatier says a lot about his commitment to whatever his role, teaching at that kind of school, and his credentials. But I think most documentary filmmakers don't necessarily know how hard it's going to be, and they would maybe not do it if they knew how hard it would be. I did have a huge relapse after coming back from Utah, which we tried to capture. And the other thing I wanted to say was that making the film really did change my life. I mean, it literally saved my life. So I don't carry the shame. You know, it's not easy every day, you know, conversations with my parents. There's ways that we all fight sort of feeling invalidated or self-doubt, but that's common, right? That's universal. But making this, like, it had to come out of me. And I think it's a common thing to say that documentary is also a vehicle that gives you a safe distance to process trauma. I'm not the first to do that.
Yeah. It's just a marvelous answer you just gave there, I must say. Very open. In talking about the risks, I think one thing I'm getting after is a sense of closure that you may have been seeking. So when you started the film, were you really thinking that the film would bring you this letting go or sense of closure, or it was open-ended and you weren't really sure?
Do you want to answer this one? Do you remember our initial conversation?
Well, what I was thinking while you were talking, and I hope this answers your question about her awareness of the possibility of closure, but I was thinking about how our shooting strategy evolved as your recognition that you would have to be in the film evolved. But at the same time, as I recall, we started out always having a camera on you from the beginning, from the early interviews. Right. And the reason we did that was, it was your idea, and it was because you knew this would have some kind of autobiographical feature. You didn't think you would be in the film, right. But I feel like you wanted to have
just in case.
One foot at each possibility, and then I remember the sinking dread that you felt when, I think in Utah, we were like, oh God, you really have to be in this film, and you're like, I really don't want to be in this film. Right. But it became clear and clear that you had to be. But and my sense of you with the risk taking was that, and I think maybe this is partly an answer to the quest for closure. I really did think from the beginning that you did have this kind of optimism that you're going to find answers, and when you do, it's going to piece things together in this way that it's going to bring some kind of coherence to a very fragmented reality. And I think you felt that from the beginning, and then yes, I don't think you understood how exposed you would feel.
Yeah. The short answer is that I had no idea how hard it would be, and it got harder and harder. And by the end, when we filmed an interview with me that I cut severely from the film, you know, I mean, if anyone else here has suffered from PTSD or any kind of trauma, which is also common, you know, it's not linear. It comes in waves, and when you face something and open it up, it comes back again. And so I would say every day, every month, every year away from producing the film, I'm getting closer and closer to that closure. But I gave birth to my first child at the end of January, and this trauma reared its head in my birth experience because I had preeclampsia. This is total sidebar, and I was immediately had to stay in the bed, and I was sort of locked in the bed because you can't get up and you're on this magnesium drip, and I had an insane PTSD flashback in the middle of my birth because I was so afraid of losing control. And all that trauma from this that I thought I had dealt with, you know, I'm a therapist, I'm good. Like, no, all came back. And so I've been dealing with that now. But yeah, and so also the women are in different places that, you know, with this journey too. Just want to put that out there. Okay.
Now, can I ask Wendy, is this the first time you've seen the film?
It's the first time I've seen this version of it, and it was at least 5 years ago. that I last saw another version.
And?
So, you know, Leslie was very kind. She said, "Mom, I hope you're okay because I'm not sure you come out too good in this film." Which I thought was, you know, I didn't know what to make of that. But, you know, my answer or my feelings, obviously I think other parents and specifically other mothers that I was in touch with when this was happening, one in particular, a very, very bright, elegant, strong woman, had actually used the consultant we went to, and her son went someplace different. And she has never seen this film, and when it shows in Buffalo, New York, I'm going to make sure she's there, so that'll be kind of interesting. But the point is, there were a lot of parents struggling for answers. The love and the wanting, especially from both myself and Leslie's father, was a recognition of how special she was. And when she couldn't think, it was a fracture that I couldn't just sit back and do nothing about. And so I did something. I always say on my tombstone, I wanted to say she tried. Obviously, I feel now that I got it wrong. However, we're sitting here on this stage and having this conversation, and the fact that you dedicated the film to students who went to Oakley who are dead.
Yes.
And there's still other schools like this that perhaps need to be regulated or examined. I think it's really meant to be not about failure or missed opportunities or wrong choices, but about the human condition, the love for parents and children, and how imperfect it can be, and how we just have to try to get it better and to talk.
Yes, yes. I'm fine with it. I need to exhale. I think it'd be best if we went to the audience. Who has a question first? We're going to give this one first. Okay. Yes, over here. We have someone here on this, right over here.
Yes. I wondered.
Wait for the mic, please. Thank you.
I wanted to ask your mother first. Did you address her depression in any way? Did she ever get any treatment for that? And once you were at Oakley, did they address that? Or were you just considered a discipline problem?
Thank you. So she had some therapy, and actually she had gone into a day, well, it was an overnight treatment place in Buffalo, New York. So we were trying to deal with what I'm calling a mental fracture breakdown. And I'm not a therapist, but those are my words. The fear as a mother, and especially with someone, I have two very precious daughters who have incredible minds and hearts and souls, and they're worth fighting for, and they're worth saving. And I just want to say one more thing. These schools are so expensive. And if it is a game or a manipulation, and I bought into it, I'm going to tell you it changed the rest of my life, because I spent all my retirement money to send her, which I would do again for either of my daughters, because I'm Mama Bear, you know. But if it's a game, it's also rather sinful that they are not, if they're not doing their job and they're taking all this money. I guess most people maybe could afford it. We weren't really there, we just strove and did it. So that's another aspect of a fraud.
How much was it? I'm curious.
It was, my recollection now, back then, it was $5,000 a month. And Leslie, I think there was a question.
Yeah, except actually halfway through, we couldn't afford it anymore, and I had sort of bought into to what it was, and I wanted to graduate, so I was there for free after, I think, 8 months. I was like on a scholarship. So it just sort of shows you how, you know, you have to just, how committed I was to just sort of beaten into submission there. But I don't know if the question was simply do with the depression and once there. There was a group and we had individual therapists. We were supposed to do family therapy, but it didn't really work. And I had therapy and we talked about some stuff. There was like an 85-year-old man that I saw like once who gave me medication, all the kids' medication, and we took it. I think I was on Adderall once, there I was on something else. But you couldn't, what were you gonna say to the therapist? I mean, you get to just sort of like, you just had to act in your best behavior, and then we were in group therapy like every day, all the time. So, yeah.
I would like to say one positive thing about the group therapy that they had every night. Leslie later applied for a job at Apple, and there were 800 applicants for 40 spots. So she called me and told me this. I said, oh, we'll try your best. And she said there was a test, and we're not the best test takers. So I said, oh. And then she called me back and said she passed the test and she was going to go into interviews, and there were 4 interviews. I said, Leslie, you got it. And she got furious. But one thing at Oakley, I would say she perfected how to listen and how to interview. And obviously that's a small thing, but what I'm saying to you is, I think there were elements that completed who she is today, and some of them have value.
Who else? Question?
Can I respond to that? Just for the record, I don't agree. I think I would have had other life experiences and what? Oh, okay, yeah, it is funny. And I would have had other life experiences that would have given me those attributes if I needed them. But I understand.
I was proud of you.
Okay, who else has a question? Up in the top left there. Yeah, David's coming soon now. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. That must have been a really difficult film to do.
Speak up a bit, please.
It must have been a really difficult film to do, and I can't say that I took pleasure in watching it, but I got a lot of understanding out of it. My question has to do with the interviews you conducted with the staff. Can you hear okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so you interviewed several staff members and only some of them made it to the film, and I understand that. But how many of those staff members were still working there, and how many were not?
Oops.
Should be on.
Yeah. So at the time we were filming, actually only one, and he's not in the film. He was the principal, the headmaster. And the other 3 had moved on. The one that we spoke to in the car, you could tell that we sort of were doing audio only interviews with them on purpose. He was, I think he has his own practice, private practice as a therapist. And the science teacher was working as a teacher. He's now retired at another school.
So a couple comments. First of all, one of the classmates that you interviewed, she was very open. She was in a motel, I think, sitting on a bed at the edge of the bed. And as you went through that process of interviewing her, did that really resonate with you? Like, I think I've found, was she a kindred soul when you knew her, or the interview helped you feel like, here's somebody that is really speaking to me. I'm feeling better about this interview. She's giving me some light that I can share.
I don't know what your remembrance is, Jen, but I felt that more with Whitney, the dancer. She seemed fragile, but also open, and she brought that journal. Like when I called her, I hadn't spoken to her in 10 years, and I just called her and was like, can we talk about this? And then she came, and she obviously had this like itch to scratch that she wanted to talk. So that to me was, I think, more of like a connection. But those kinds of connections have sort of grown since, and the film's now coming out. I have people from the same groups that like Paris Hilton's film just came out about her experience in a different school in Utah. And there's a Facebook group called Breaking Code Silence, and there's followers who call themselves survivors, and they, them and then my former classmates are kind of all processing and starting to watch the film. So I'm trying to figure out how to help them and not trigger them.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a different answer than you were asking.
It's okay. I also want to compliment you on your narration, your voiceover, which is very precise.
Yeah.
And in writing that, did that come easily to you?
No, I think it's
Think
clear.
so.
It doesn't come easy to me. Well, the precision maybe in the writing, but in the like making it fit in what time we had and in the performance, is not my strong suit.
Mm-hmm. Well, may take one or two more questions if they're there. Sure, right down front. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. I'm a friend of the family, and I'm here because these are amazing people. And the openness and the love that has been expressed today is very special, because being and watching the journey as a friend of the family, and also Leslie when we came to visit and stayed for a bit, your writing is beautiful. Your emotions and feelings are real. You've come a long way. You're wonderful. And thank you for sharing. I think the one thing I would like to also say is, Lindy, I know how hard it was. I know the heart attack and everything else that was going on at that point was just so crazy. And Emily, I know that you and your dad wanted to make sure that everything came through. So as a person who practiced mental health during this period, I can honestly say there were no good places to go, but these are heinous people that need to be stopped in this country.
Can I say one quick thing?
Sure, go ahead.
I just want to make it clear that's not in the film. This is not an investigative film at all, and people are out there making those films, and those films will come out about this industry. But we don't claim to have answers or even paint sort of this one derelict school or this one derelict system. I think there are many ways that our healthcare and mental health care for our young people and for our vulnerable people at any age can be more restorative and less traumatic when it involves a hospitalization. So, I'm really personally interested around this project in creating awareness, just destigmatizing the topic in general. I think people think I'm brave for making this film. I'm not that brave. I mean, I'm brave, I'm strong, but I had to make this film. And thank you, Annie, also for saying what you said. But, this isn't just one bad place. This is everywhere. This is in your homes. And, we need to be able to talk about, the days that are bad, like the way we talk about needing to go to urgent care for a broken toe, right? That's the goal.
Well, I think since it's after, we have one more? Okay, let's do one more question. Okay, two of your.
I just thought it was very striking how a lot of the images in the film were either very bleak and you could say beautiful, but also arid and bleak, and alternating with, say, a window that's misted over with drops and fog, and I thought it was quite striking, and they weren't like sunny, cheery days. So I wondered if you could comment about the synergy between the images and the look of the film and the feeling of the film.
Well, you go first. I'm talking for
Okay.
So it should be on, no?
It's on.
Just talking to her.
Thank you for that question. It's been a long time since Leslie and I shot this film, and so I'm trying to gather my thoughts from that time. And what I remember is that we knew, and this was something Leslie wanted and communicated to me, is that she really wanted the landscape to feature very prominently as a kind of psychological space and a kind of projection of psychology and emotional and feelings. And so that was always front of mind everywhere we went, and in a certain way, it was kind of the grammar of the film that we wanted to establish. Some of that was about this kind of concept, and some of it was about the practicality of knowing that we were endeavoring on a film that, you know, with characters who are not all going to want to be identified. And we will have to do some audio-only things, so how can we kind of carry the viewer along in a space? So the space was going to be very important.
Okay, you want to?
I think you answered it. But yeah, it was just going to be, you know, a cool temperature film. It wasn't going to be, it was never going to be a bright, cheery thing, and I think Jen captured those parts of that. We have more to say, I'm sure, on the topic.
Okay, I think we had one more right here.
Yes, I have one question for Leslie, one for Matteo. Leslie, are you now a career documentary filmmaker?
Yes, I am. No, I've made, I've produced other features, other documentary features, and a comedy web series that were in the festival circuit. This was my directorial debut at this scale. So I would say yes, absolutely.
Great. And Matteo, I loved your film, and has Walter seen it?
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah, he has, and showing it to him the first time was really difficult because for him, he's been so open to anyone, you know, if anyone wanted to know, he would tell them about his anxiety and depression because he wants to destigmatize it. But I think for someone hearing themselves say these things for the first time, it was really difficult. And at first he was like, you know, there are things in here that I don't want in the film. And it was like kind of an emotional roller coaster for me because I got really personally and emotionally invested in it, and all I wanted to do was make sure to respect him and make him come out dignified. And for a moment it felt like I had kind of failed him in that respect, but you know, after thinking about it and talking to some of my advisors who helped me when I was in crisis mode, you know, I talked to him and I was like, I really understand how you're feeling, but I think there are these things that you feel uncomfortable about are the things in here that are going to help people and that where people are going to empathize with. And eventually, you know, he realized, he's like, oh yeah, you're right, and I really appreciate you like guiding me along in that. But you know, after the second time he watched it and kind of like okayed it, because you know, it was a film we made together and I wanted to make sure that he felt good about it too, and like I put it out there. After that second time, he hasn't really seen it again because it's so really difficult for him, but he has seen it, yeah.
Well, let me say to you, it's an extremely accomplished film for a senior thesis film. I think you're a filmmaker to keep an eye on, and I hope we see you back at the Middle River Filmmakers Festival. And for all of you who have come, Lindy and Jen, and particularly Leslie, thank you for bringing this courageous film to us at the world premiere. I'm deeply grateful for this. Let's give them a round of applause, please.